Good morning, church. Today is Thursday, May 14th. After what seems like a very long shutdown, the world is beginning to open up again. Have you noticed? But even as we open up, that will be a slow process, by the way, but even as we open up, there are some who are very afraid, and it's understandable. The virus is still active, and people are still getting sick. But this morning, I want us to talk about the fear involved in all of this. It's not just fear of the virus. People are afraid of a lot of things right now. I recently heard a very interesting way to reach into someone's life, and you may get to practice this at some point. When people are angry, when they're verbally attacking others, when they're displaying any kind of hate towards others, and at an appropriate time, by the way, and it's probably not at that moment of their rage, but at an appropriate time, a wonderful question to ask them is, what are you afraid of? At the root of anger and hate, there's fear. Even in casual conversations. And this might be a fun question to ask in places like our Connect groups or with your family. A fun question to ask would be, what are you afraid of? It's really a good question. Because whatever we are afraid of reveals a lot about us. I think of Bible characters that were angry. Perhaps one of the reasons that Pharaoh was so resistant to Moses was because he was afraid. He was afraid that maybe he was not as powerful as someone else, namely the God of Moses. Maybe the reason Jonah was fleeing from God was that he was afraid that by following through on what God had told him to do, that is, going to Nineveh and preaching to the people there. Remember, Nineveh was the capital of the enemy. Maybe Jonah was afraid that the enemy would be made stronger. That really is the indication in that book of Jonah. Maybe the reason that Saul of Tarsus was so embittered against the church was that he was afraid that his traditions, his cherished credentials, were being threatened. Even today, maybe one of the reasons that bullies do their bullying is because they're afraid that their own weaknesses might be exposed. Occasionally, we know that someone in the church gets angry. We need to be very careful how we handle that. It's been my observation that most of the time they are angry because they are afraid that the church is in some way being threatened. They aren't evil people. They're very sincere, and they need to be heard. Their anger stems from a threat to something that they may see as sacred. And so we need to be very careful how we handle that. Fear takes us in a lot of directions. We look around today and we see a lot of people living in fear. Fear of this virus, economic fear, fear of rejection, fear of loneliness, maybe fear of inadequacy. And that fear makes them unable to enjoy life. There's always that possibility lurking out there that the very thing that they are afraid of is going to jump on them and destroy them in some way. And so that fear is constant, and that fear is nagging, and that fear is destructive. I wanted to talk about fear today because I'm aware that there are many who are being tormented by their own fears right now. But let me also remind you that the Scripture has given us a remedy. There are 3 things that can defeat the fear in our lives. Those 3 things: faith, hope, and love. John wrote in the book of 1 John, he wrote that perfect love casts out fear. When we love, not the petty jealousy kind of love, but God's agape type love. When we love that way, we have no fear. There's not room. When we have hope, there's no reason to fear. And when we practice our faith, fear is overcome with the very presence of God. In a world filled with so much fear and anxiety, is it any surprise that God's gifts to us include ways to overcome that fear and anxiety? In 1 Corinthians chapters 12, 13, and 14, Paul is writing to those Corinthian Christians, and he's talking in those chapters about spiritual gifts. Too often we get caught up in debating which of those gifts is miraculous and which is not. That's not the point of the passage. The point of the passage is that God has equipped us to be what he needs us to be in this world. When we look at those things that he has equipped us with, particularly in chapter 13, it points at these three things that really equip us to face the fear of the world. Those three things being faith, hope, and love. He's equipped us. He, God, has equipped us, believers today, to stand confidently in a tumultuous world. We are not defeated by the elements of our world that bring fear. We are blessed with the peace that comes with faith, hope, and love. And here's the good part. Even today, we can practice those things. This is not a long-term, hard road to go down before we get to that peace. This day, we can practice these things. So Christians, understand, we are made in the image of God, meant to be a light to a dark and scary world. But the Spirit of God lives in you. So I'd urge you this day, go and be that light. Have a great day.